1. What's good, everyone? Coach D here, the Shift Method Podcast. Hope you all are having a great day. This is going to be coming out. This is podcast episode number 37, coming out on February 27th. And with me today, I have someone, we actually just got acquainted kind of midpoint last year, didn't have too much time to speak together. But I know him through a friend, and he has a really, really awesome company and initiative that he's going to talk about. So I'm really excited to kind of hear a little bit more about him, kind of his origin story, and more about his business. And it will be a great topic for all of you listeners out there to kind of check out. And so we're going to talk to Brendan. Brendan, can you just introduce yourself to the people briefly for me?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Damon. My name is Brendan Aylward. I'm out in Massachusetts here, and I work as a gym owner, strength and conditioning coach, as well as, I guess you would consider it an educator, as a course that I teach, involved in some research specifically catered to improving health outcomes in individuals with disabilities. Cerebral palsy specifically is what I'm most interested in. But yeah, I work in kind of the intersection of disability services and fitness. And my career has kind of revolved around finding ways to make fitness more accessible for people of all abilities. So
I love it. I love it. Yes. I first heard about Brendan when we were talking. I was talking to one of our mutual contacts, my good friend, Katie Hoff, who used to work at USF. And, Campus Rec, it does a lot of amazing things. But one thing that they really focus on the fitness space is definitely making sure fitness is inclusive for everyone. And so she mentioned to me about Brendan and this course, which she'll talk about here in a little bit, called AdaptX. And I read about it. I'm like, this sounds like an amazing thing to do. So much so that I signed up for it myself because I'm hoping to gain some awesome skills from it. But of course, before we get into that, this is a fitness-based podcast. So I got to know about you, Brendan, and what you do. So can you kind of just go into how you got to fitness, what your fitness origin story is?
yeah, I mean, I think I didn't start really training or lifting until last couple of years of high school. Really took a liking to it pretty quickly. But I went to college for special education initially. I was first introduced to Special Olympics and Best Buddies, a couple organizations that some people may be familiar with, during high school. And really thought that my career was going to take me back to the high school that I went to as a special ed teacher. I kind of wanted to work with those kids that I was working with through Special Olympics. But about halfway through college, kind of decided that wanted something a little more active, wanted something outside of a classroom with a little more freedom than the very structured and rigid special ed curriculums. So about sophomore year of college is when I came up with the concept for my gym. I wanted to create an inclusive strength and conditioning facility where my Special Olympic athletes could train alongside their peers. And there wasn't really any model to follow. I'm not too familiar with other for-profit strength and conditioning facilities kind of founded on the same precipice of training people with and without disabilities simultaneously. So basically those last 2 or 3 years of college, I really just immersed myself in as many experiences as possible. I was in Boston, but commuting an hour to work with the high schools, basketball and hockey teams for free as their strength and conditioning coach, just to kind of get some experience, learn what I could. And those first clients eventually would become paying clients. And I thought kind of slowly build up my membership base. I was going to people's houses to train them, young adults with autism, et cetera. And just try to build up some career capital and kind of figure out what I needed to learn, what I need to improve upon. And then 1 year after I graduated college, I spent 1 year as a special ed aide at a middle school. And then I spent that year kind of coming up with the business plan and the structure for the gym. And 7 years ago is when I opened Unified Health and Performance, which is my strength and conditioning facility here in Massachusetts.
That is awesome, man. It always makes me happy to hear a success story in the fitness space, because as someone who has a fitness business, without a physical space though, but just in general, it's hard, man. It's hard to survive. And I know Boston, although you have a really cool niche, it's probably another area that's, I would imagine, is quite heavily saturated in the fitness industry.
Yeah.
So it's always a cool testament to hear that you were able to kind of get into the market, find something that made you valuable to the community, and then look at you still thriving and being out
Yeah,
there.
I mean, for better or worse, I'm probably about an hour outside of Boston now.
Okay,
A
gotcha.
lot of people initially were like, "Oh, you should be close to the city." Like, you have Children's Hospital, you have all these different organizations that are kind of based in Boston. I'm kind of out in the suburbs in the middle of nowhere. But it allowed me to, I guess, kind of have ownership of this market, and just kind of, I was already immersed in this community. I was relatively well known amongst the school and all that stuff from my involvement with Special Olympics and stuff. But yeah, like you said, it's a tough sell to convince the people. Like, I probably spent 2 or 3 thousand hours of community service with Special Olympics and strength and conditioning for the high school, and it's tough to convince someone that, like, sometimes that's what it takes to build what can become something more profitable. But I was fortunate, I guess, that I was living at home and commuting to college for a
Hmm.
portion of that time, working full time as a behavioral therapist and kind of subsidizing my lifestyle that way. And I know not everyone has that privilege of being able to do things for free and such, but it was integral to my success, I think.
Yeah. And, I haven't heard an easy story yet for those who, made the business. So, if there is one out there, I'd be happy to hear that too, from all angles. But yeah, it sounds like the 80-hour work weeks, the dual major in college, that all sounds like it's part of the plan at some point.
Yes, yeah, I think so. And I mean, I wouldn't glorify like the amount that I work. I don't view it as a badge of honor or something impressive. In many ways, it's actually unimpressive that I still have to work so much to maintain my businesses. But um, I think I've been consistently good at what I do for the last 7 or 8 years instead of like working in small bursts. Like, I work in some capacity every day, and I think kind of stacking those bricks is what kind of helped the business become successful. But I don't think I would really consider it a significant success until it runs a little less in my life, until I'm kind of not here all the time, and we're working towards that. But I think a lot of people set out to run a business, and the business ends up running you. But
Yeah, I've heard that too, man. I've heard
yeah,
that too. But we do it for the people, right? We do it all for a good cause, man.
yeah.
That's awesome, dude. Well, thank you for a little bit of backstory. And yeah, like I still, fitness spaces that I always hear about, and I get like, various emails, and I hear it's all different gyms across the country. I haven't really heard of any gym that does something like what you do. The closest thing I know, and I'll plug this gym. I actually learned about it not too long ago. They're actually kind of close to me, which is funny. They are a strength and conditioning facility. I believe it's called Barwis, and they do some like, I believe, neurological rehab for like injury, but I don't think they work with special needs. So that is something that is very unique that I have not heard anyone else do in the community.
Yeah, Barwis Methods seems like a really cool facility. I think they have 3 or 4 locations. They do have their neurological, I think it's called neurological reengineering program, but I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure they also have a foundation that they kind of launched as a branch of their business to support individuals with disabilities training.
Okay.
I'm not sure it's the main component of their business, but in the same way that like a lot of organizations that serve people with disabilities are nonprofits, and there's socioeconomic reasons for that kind of support that business model. But I was very keen on trying to demonstrate how inclusion was like a beneficial and a profitable business decision, and not just something you do because it's the ethical and the goodwill decision. I wanted to kind of demonstrate how it can be an integral part of a business growing. So of course there's some athletes that aren't able to afford the training, and we can offset that cost by training other populations and just effectively running a healthy business that allows us to kind of support those individuals that need a little more financially. But I think in the same way as like, I think Barwis trains a lot of high school athletes and college athletes and adults. And I'm sure in that same way that allows them to kind of cater to the individuals with disabilities as well and kind of touch on both populations. But yeah, they look like a fantastic facility, and they have really nice and large facilities, and
Yeah.
something for me to kind of, I guess, maybe aspire to is getting to that level. But bigger facility, bigger headache sometimes. So
That's also true. Yeah, I'm hoping to check them out over spring breaks coming up in a couple of weeks. I'm hoping to stop by because I keep seeing them online. It's a gorgeous facility and literally like down the street from like
is it?
where I
Yeah.
grew up.
Cool.
Yeah, it's so close to me.
Cool.
So definitely we'll check that out. And yeah, but like you said, like you being one of the first people in this space, it also gives people some of the courage to maybe also try to mimic that business model, right? So hopefully it inspires others to be like, hey, maybe, at once I thought this was impossible. And even though it's something that like ethically, morally, and like passionate wise, I want to do, I just never saw someone do it. And now that you've seen someone do it, kind of like the representation side of things, now that I see other people doing it, it encourages people to want to go out and make great things happen.
Yeah, and I mean, I won't pretend that I have the answers or the perfect or the perfect model, but I think sometimes people will claim to be inclusive, but it's like just training people with disabilities in isolation, or it's maybe worked with a couple athletes with disabilities at some point in your past. And what we've really worked on, and it was actually somewhat improved through the process of kind of reorganizing our gym with COVID, but we were trying to get to a point where we didn't differentiate between populations. And I mean, of course, there's like some considerations, like maybe someone sensory need wise needs a quieter environment. But we were trying to get to the point where whether you had a disability or not, you were able to access the gym at whatever time is most convenient for you. And of course, like we run a semi-private model, so it's a little more hands-on. So there are some considerations, like I need to make sure we have ample staff for safety and just for the efficacy of the programs. But we try to make it to the point where it's not like disability classes, high school classes, college classes. It's like all athletes.
Athletes, yeah.
Yeah, but like that semi-private model is kind of essential for that, because we could have 12 athletes training, 3 of them could be college athletes, 2 could be in a wheelchair, a couple could have Down syndrome, and they're all doing their own program. So they can kind of seamlessly coexist. It's a similar structure, but obviously catered to whatever their ability and their goals are. But it allows them to train simultaneously because it's kind of under the same systems and stuff. So we found it to be pretty essential to kind of have that semi-private model. Whether some people didn't join our gym because of the presence of people with disabilities, I don't know. I'm sure there's still going to be some naive people that have certain preconceptions about disabilities, and they might see my gym as the disability gym, and because it's hard to market to it's hard to market to all the different populations. But so I don't know if people shied away from my gym because they assumed that we just worked with disabilities, or maybe that wasn't an environment they felt was best suited for them. But I guess I'll never know because those people don't really reach out to me. But it's definitely something to consider in terms of how you market what you do. But
hey, I mean, you got your target audience, and those who are meant to come will come, right?
yeah,
And those who aren't, they won't.
exactly. Right. Yeah. So like if those people are, they don't want to be in an inclusive environment, then I guess I don't want them anyway. So
Yeah, exactly. Right. Not fitting the culture, then that's
right.
fine by me, man. And you
Exactly.
definitely have set the tone for your culture, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And like you said, even though obviously different skill levels and needs may apply within a semi-private session, I think the overlying culture helps identify that this group can work side by side together in their session, which is really
and
dope.
it's had some nice trickle down effects. Like we have some high school athletes that have become Special Olympic volunteers, and
that's cool, man.
Kids who've gone off to college and studied exercise science, but they're kind of interested in doing something similar to what I'm doing. And even adults, like you'd be surprised how many adults haven't had any exposure to disabilities. And they're kind of afraid that they're going to say something wrong, or they talk to them as if they're elementary age when it's a young adult with a disability, just because of their cognition level. So it's been cool to kind of see how our adults have become more comfortable engaging with the population. And I do think it's like you mentioned before, the representation piece, I think, is an important part of making facilities more inclusive. So it's not just the physical space, and it's not just ADA standards and accessibility standards, but it's social, emotional, and all those other aspects of accessibility that are important. So
yeah, I like that, man. Big thing with me is like culture. It's one of my tenets. I'd say culture is everything. It's our beliefs, it's our actions, it's why we do the things the way that we do. And so it's cool to hear that, your interactions in a fitness lens, fitness is like the vehicle for what you do, how it's helping like shift people's mindset to how they interact in life and in their community. So like that to me is like, that's like the greatest win ever, man, is when it goes
Yeah,
from just
and
the
that's
fitness
one
to
of
other
like,
things.
yeah, and that's kind of, I guess, maybe exaggerated saying, but like we sometimes will coin like rewriting the narrative on disability. So just trying to change people's expectations, and inadvertently, like I think sometimes organizations like Special Olympics, well intended, will sometimes market someone with a disability completing a rudimentary task, and that
Mm.
and then you see on social media everyone praising that individual, and it's great. Like it's good to see people kind of demonstrating that support, but at the same time it's like, you know, that it's lowering their expectations for someone with
Mm-hmm.
a disability. So we always want to demonstrate how like this population can achieve great things when they're kind of challenged appropriately, and when they're placed in the right environment. So I think how we express disability and how we present it to the public matters a lot. So that's why we're just hired someone to kind of help with our social media and our marketing, and making a strong push for that. Just to, like you said, hopefully change the public's perception of it. So
I love that, man. And thank you for providing that background. Now, you've kind of touched on a lot of things about the business in a sense. Do you happen to have, if you had to like narrow down like your philosophy to like maybe a couple of sentences, right? Something that's going to be on your tombstone when you leave this earth, what would you say is like your fitness or business philosophy that you carry through with what you do?
um I don't know if I can articulate one, because I guess we have like the business of my gym, and then AdaptX is like the educational branch of it, and they're kind of two separate entities. But so I guess maybe if I'm just kind of providing a synopsis of like all of my work, um, it's reducing barriers to consistent physical activity, for individuals of all abilities, by kind of creating inclusive environments where they can be appropriately challenged and supported. So yeah, I guess it's been tough, and sometimes when I know when I say something like this, it sounds like it's just being like noble, but it's like I don't really view working with people with disabilities as like anything super unique. It meant so much, and it completely changed my life personally. It seemed like it did more for me than I was doing for them as a coach, and I kind of just continue that. Like it fills my cup, it keeps me
Yeah.
motivated. Like I'm 7 years strong of working every day, and I don't feel like I have any intention of stopping. And I think that's kind of rare for people to be able to withstand that level of consistent work without kind of ever fluctuating.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I kind of attribute it to the fact that like the relationships that I have with my clients really fill my cup and really motivate me to keep working. So yeah, that definitely didn't answer your tombstone question, but I don't
Hey,
know if
removing
I don't
barriers,
know if I
man.
can sum yeah, I don't know if I can sum it up in a two sentence.
Nah, that's okay.
So
I think that was articulated beautifully. It's the removal of barriers that anyone and everyone can participate in a way that makes them successful. I think I hope that every coach has that at least idea. If it's
yeah.
not like their motto or mantra, it's like their idea that like guides their fundamental principles when they train and coach people. Because ultimately, what I always say to my young coaches, I do an ACE prep course. And so we always get to like the psychology and the rapport section of like working with a client. And I always tell them, like, we are coaches, we are educators, but ultimately what we're working to do, and I know there's a big debate on like, can you change behavior and in that kind of aspect, but ultimately we're trying to leverage our clients' ability to change their behavior. Because you can have all the knowledge, you can have all the AdaptX courses, you can do X, Y, and Z, and have the alphabet behind your name and certifications and degrees. But if I cannot work to help people change their behavior through removing barriers, identifying ways to regulate their time, ways to enjoy their training, if I can't give them those tools or show them those tools and strategies, you're not going to be able to help them get active. They're not going to have the resources to be active because they are not going to change their behavior. And so ultimately, I love that, because that is ultimately what you're trying to do, is remove those barriers and help them change the behavior.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of our athletes with disabilities, you have the prevalence of secondary health conditions of
Hmm.
cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndromes that are probably directly tied to the lack of physical activity as well as the increase in sedentary behavior. And if we can kind of combat that, it doesn't have to be the perfectly periodized program. It just has to be something that gets them moving and is enjoyable enough that they want to come back.
Absolutely.
I guess it is kind of unique that we have people with disabilities that have been training with us for 6 years pretty consistently, and they rarely miss sessions. And
That's awesome.
I mean, that's a testament to their parents as well. We're fortunate to be in an area where a lot of these young adults are still supported by their families, and or they have disability service organizations that are willing to take them to the gym. But I think it's essential to create an environment where they can train consistently. That's another one of my gripes sometimes is gyms will do like 8-week programs. And that's all well and good. It's well intentioned, but if someone came to you with a specific goal of trying to lose X amount of weight or trying to improve their health, you would never be like, yeah, give me 8 weeks and then you can take the rest of the year off. So it's like you have to kind of you either care about being inclusive and accessible or you don't. Like you got to build it into your business,
Absolutely.
or else you're not really making a significant change. So
That's a very true statement, sir.
yeah.
Now, you talked a little bit about, and we'll get more into it in a second, about your training and what you do at your facility. What does your current training look like? I know you mentioned briefly how you kind of got into training, and I think you mentioned earlier you might be getting ready for a run in the morning. What are you doing?
Yeah, I run for Team Hoyt, so it's a wheelchair racing team. So Rick and Dick Hoyt kind of pioneered inclusion within endurance sports. So father son duo, they were the first ones to run a marathon, to run the Boston Marathon in a wheelchair. Son or father pushing his son in a wheelchair, and I was introduced to them 6 or 7 years ago, and I started running with them. And so Jacob, the kid that I push, him and I met through Best Buddies when I was in high school, and he was 9 years old. He was the younger brother of someone that I was working with through Best Buddies, and became very close with him. And through high school and college, he spent the weekends with me. So he lived with my family on the weekends. He still lives with me and my wife on the weekends now. He's back at home now, hopefully getting ready for bed soon. But so him and I run marathons together, 5Ks, etc. So I push him in a wheelchair, and we're trying to qualify for the Boston Marathon this
Oh,
spring.
wow.
Yeah, so we're running the Martha's Vineyard Marathon on May 20th, and we have to run under 3 hours to qualify for Boston. So
Okay.
equates to like a 650 mile. So yeah, we've been working at that goal for a little bit. Hopefully we'll get it done. We were on pace to do so last year and got a flat tire.
Oh, no.
But it's yeah, training's going well. So we run about 45 to 50 miles a week, and
Man.
yeah,
650 mile. That's I did
26.
I have a little bit of an endurance background. Like growing up, I did like 5Ks and 10Ks. And like recently I did the Kipchoge challenge. Did you hear about this?
Trying to run whatever his marathon pace is for as long as
13, I
possible.
think it was 13
Miles per hour.
miles per hour consistently.
Yeah.
I think I got to like 60, 70 seconds. And I can run
Yeah.
fast. Like I can hit almost 20, but like, it's such an awkward speed. It's like it's just fast enough to where it's basically a sprint, but
It's
it's
sprint,
not
yeah.
slow enough to where you can kind of cruise. And I was like, this
But
is
I mean, it's
insane.
crazy. It's crazy to think that they do that for 2 hours straight. I
Yes.
always like, I think it's something like a lot of sports, like you don't really appreciate it unless you're in it. Like if you're
No.
watching golf, like you don't appreciate watching golf unless you golf, or same with like
Yeah,
really any
yeah.
sport, I think to a degree. So I don't think people really realize how impressive elite marathoners are, as athletes, but I certainly do because I
Yeah,
couldn't do
man.
it.
Well, very cool. And that's, the wheelchair is a really cool element to it too, where those individuals get to participate as well. So I'll be cheering for you to be in the Boston marathons. That's
Thank
awesome,
you.
man.
Thank you.
Now we kind of talked a lot about, AdaptX, which is really cool about your business and your structure and all that. So overall, we know you serve the general population as well as I believe the term you use is adaptive athletes. So people who may have physical or cognitive limitations. What exact services do you offer to your individuals that you serve?
Yeah, so we have about 250 members at my gym, maybe about a fifth of which have disabilities. So those other couple hundred members are a little over 100 middle school, high school, college athletes. So those are typically kids training for a specific sport or a specific goal. And then general population adults, maybe 65, 70 adults who are training for typical general health, body composition goals, etc. So those are kind of the populations we serve. And we use adaptive athletes as a differentiating term just to kind of clarify what it's intended to differentiate, I suppose. But eventually, hopefully, it gets to a point where it's not a term that's needed. Not that I think it's derogatory in any way, but I think every athlete and every client has to adapt to their ever evolving situations. So I'm not sure when that became the go-to term, but it's the one that's most recognizable. So some of those adults do group classes. We run some group classes like circuit training based classes, but 75-80% of our members are on that kind of individualized programming semi-private model.
Nice.
And we have sessions throughout the day that our clients schedule. So they can book various times throughout the day that are most convenient for them. And they come in, and myself and my coaches and our interns will help them through those programs. So large amount of my time is actually spent programming. It's something that that I've been trying to work to streamline and hopefully offload to some of our other coaches, but we're trying to find a way to systemize it a little bit better. But it's something that right now is a little bit of a bottleneck of my time, but it's something I really enjoy doing. I think that's the other thing to it. It's like I've written so many at this point that it's kind of like mindless work for me, and
Yeah,
it makes me feel like I'm getting things done. And I know that my time could likely be better spent in a more creative outlet, working on some other things. So I recognize it as maybe a negative tendency for me to kind of default to programming and being unwilling to delegate it to my other coaches, because to me it's easy, like it's comfortable, it's
yeah.
something I enjoy doing, but I realize that it might not be the best use of my time, or at least the amount of time that I put into it now. But
Yeah. The programming side, I agree with. I love writing them so much,
so
and
do
so I
I.
know one day you'll hopefully have my own facility or my own business in that regard. I know I'm gonna want to work with young coaches and let them take over, but I'm like, I love programming so much. Just want to
Yeah.
keep it. I got to keep it in some capacity, man.
I'm like, I mean, I'm somewhere in between. Like, I really like all the nuances and the intricacies of programming. I'm somewhere in between that and the environment and the effort and the intent that you drive matters more than the nuances of the programming, especially with like a lot of the kids that we're working with, like middle school athletes, like don't need obviously super
No.
complex programs. Like in some situations, like I would prefer if they were just going off for free play. Like when I grew up, it's back in my day, like it was just like we were outside like all day, like
Yeah,
playing
yeah.
sports and various things. And but I recognize that that's not really how the world is structured anymore. Like so many activities for the kids are a lot more structured. So in some scenarios, I kind of wish that those younger athletes just had other outlets to be active. But they come to my gym. Obviously, I love having them at the gym, and I try to make it as engaging and beneficial as possible. But I think we do a pretty good job with the youth athletes. But I think there's other activities that are beneficial for kids as well. But the programming is something that I think I'll always have a fondness for, but it's something that I should probably work to systematize and automate a little better within our coaching staff. So.
Now, do you have like local contracts with like high schools in the area? Or are these kids that are coming like one on one just because the parents heard about you? Like, how does that relationship work?
Yeah, it's a private sector, I guess. So we have no real affiliation with the high school, outside of like I kind of started doing some volunteer work over there with a couple sports programs, and it's kind of just grown through word of mouth, kids bringing friends, social media, etc. So yeah, no specific relationships with schools. There's a couple disability service programs, residential programs nearby that will send group classes a few times a week. So they come, and that's, I guess, an affiliation with an outside organization. But the majority of our members, their parents, their family are paying for their memberships. So
Gotcha. Very cool. Because yeah, I've seen like some strength and conditioning, like privatized strength and conditioning facilities. They'll like contract with a local university, be like, hey, you bring X number of teams, we do this. Or sometimes athletes from the university will just come on their own free will kind of thing. So I always like to hear those different models that
yeah, maybe that's an area that I'm kind of missing the boat on. But it hasn't really been something. Sometimes I found like if I used to do a lot of groups like when I was first starting because it seemed like a good way to get a lot of people in. But it was tough to kind of cater to, like if you have an entire football team or something, sometimes it's tough to cater to the wide range of abilities. And
yeah.
I've seen what high school strength and conditioning groups sometimes look like, and it's not exactly, and it's not to knock it, but it's not exactly what I want my programs to look like. So
I know what you mean.
yeah, so being able to run like kind of a private individualized option seems to be a little better for our situation. And I don't know if I can't really recall if it might have kind of been spearheaded with COVID, like when the restrictions made us only able to train 4 or 5 people at a time. Like we had
Right.
a really small facility, and it was like everyone had to be 6 feet apart, and we're setting up like these ridiculous stations, and so we could only fit 4 or 5 people at a time. So it was like hour sessions all day, like 5 kids at a time. Like, here's your program, like stay in your corner. Here's a couple dumbbells and a kettlebell. And so it was almost like we moved away from large groups and towards like the semi-private model. Kind of already trending that way, but I think COVID almost like cleaned up some of our systems to a degree.
Yeah, that's a very true point. Now, of course, big thing we of course got to dive a little bit deeper into, because I know you've mentioned it a couple times here, Brennan, is of course the AdaptX courses. This is something that I recently signed up for, and I'm excited to really get into that content on my own time, because I know it's going to be an awesome thing to have. Because, in my own personal experience, working at a rec center and working, privately, I've come across individuals where I can definitely say, like, and maybe it's a bad stereotype. I'm like, if I had an individual with a physical or cognitive limitation, am I comfortable working with them? And so I'm very excited to take that course and hopefully get some skills that I can not only market to work with those individuals, but then ultimately work to break down those stigmas of like, no, these people are just like everyone else, man. Everyone has limitations that we can work through. And now I have the tools and resources to do it. So can you kind of just break down, like, what the AdaptX course does for, we have a lot of personal trainers that listen to this podcast. So what kind of value does it provide for them?
Yeah, so AdaptX started about 4 years ago, or what has become AdaptX started about 4 years ago, when I was initially trying to make some onboarding resources for my interns. So I got practicum students from a few different universities, and so I was trying to build out some content that would make that internship experience a little more beneficial, kind of acclimate them to some of our systems and programming strategies before they got here. And just kind of kept building to it, kept adding to it. The mission through AdaptX, at least initially, was kind of the same as through my gym, which was to make fitness more accessible for people with disabilities. And I guess the way I identified doing that was a little different than other nonprofits. Like, a lot of nonprofits cater to the individuals with disabilities themselves. I thought it might be more important to cater to the professionals and the people that can create these opportunities for the athletes. So we started kind of building out, and I say we, but I guess it was kind of a solo project, kind of building out a curriculum, kept adding to it until it became something robust enough that I thought it would be worth maybe selling to the masses. And I think it's something that's tough as like, I guess you could call it a content creator. You can kind of always nitpick your curriculum, and you can just sit on something forever and be like, oh, I'll send this out when it's ready. And I'm on,
It'll
like,
never
my
be ready.
yeah, exactly. Like, it's never going to be perfect. And the idea that I can create a course that encompasses every scenario and all things disability is naive at best. So we've gone through a few iterations of it. I've updated it, revised the curriculum, added videos to it, etc. But what essentially the course is an introduction to kind of the anatomical and the cognitive and behavioral characteristics of various diagnoses. But when we dive into those diagnoses, it's like we try to keep this overarching principle of what's called the social model of disability, which is basically like an individual is not disabled by their specific impairments, but rather by environments that don't account for their differences. And if we kind of keep this lens in mind as we go through, like I'll have a presentation on Down syndrome, and we'll be talking about hypermobility, and we'll be talking about obstructive sleep apnea and hypotonia, and like all these characteristics are important, but they really just are intended to kind of influence your programming and your training strategies. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is to create an environment where these athletes can train consistently. So what I hope people take away from the course is a deeper understanding of disability. Kind of like you said when you were introducing it, like I want trainers to see someone with a disability and not think like, can I do that? Am I well equipped to work with that person? So I want to be able to give people confidence to work with individuals with disabilities. I want to give them the strategies. And then I guess the one, maybe not the one, but one aspect that's kind of unique to my course is, I think to a degree, it's not like other certification courses that require kind of built-in recurring revenue streams, like you have to complete X number of CEUs to maintain your licensure, et cetera. Like AdaptX isn't a licensure. It's not like if you're working at a commercial gym, you're probably still going to need a personal trainer license, and you might still need liability insurance if you're working in a private facility. But what my course hopefully does is gives people the tools, and then I want to continue to be involved in their development as a coach. And we have monthly live presentations on different topics. We bring in colleagues that have specialties in various niches. And I just want to build out the most comprehensive curriculum and educational database on all things disability and inclusion and accessibility. So that was kind of the intention of the course, and that's where it is now.
I love that, man. I really, admire you, because that is where I hope, my business can eventually evolve into, man, is because, what I always tell people is my business is called the Shift Method Fitness and Education. And so what you're doing is like the dream of like, you have your brick and mortar spot where you're actually like, doing the thing, creating the culture, and actually like performing the necessary moves and exercises, et cetera, to get people to be fit in the way they want. But also you're training individuals to then emulate what you do and what your programming and what your methodology is, which is amazing, because then it's not just stuck in your spot. It's coaches can then take the information and learn it from themselves, and then work with other coaches and pass on information to them. And it just creates this beautiful like spiderweb effect of disseminating information. And so to hear that you went from, starting your spot, and then you introduced this coursework, and now you have like the guest speakers and everything, like that is so cool to hear and so inspiring to hear. And correct me if I'm wrong, this is content that can also help coaches if they have their PT certifications. This can be used as CECs for them.
Yeah. We have CEUs through ACE and NASM and the NSCA. So if you have a CSCS too, but I think it's the two go hand in hand. Like the goal of the course is not to certify X number of coaches. It's for X number of athletes to benefit from those coaches. So like I remember back when I was kind of just starting, there were a couple professors at a local university that were like really adamant on franchising my gym. And I was like, I don't know if that's really the path I want to go. And so instead, I kind of saw AdaptX as like my way of reaching people outside of my small area. Yeah. Like I love when I see some coach who's taken my course, like I love seeing the programs that they run. Like that gives me a lot of fulfillment. And maybe I'll connect with someone through AdaptX that wants to open their own gym, and they can open another unified health and performance location. And I have all those systems in place that we built here that could help those people from afar kind of run their gym. So I think the two might go hand in hand, and that's one direction we kind of hope to take it in, is maybe I can have other locations that kind of come about through the AdaptX course and through the coaches we get to work with. So.
And now remind me, once the students go through all the content, the interactive side of it, they have a exam at the end. Is it like a project? What does it look like?
Yeah, there's some discussion boards and case study, multiple choice questions throughout, kind of embedded in the course. And then there's a short answer final exam. I go back and forth on how strenuous I want to make that final exam period. Like I know if they demonstrate that they went through the course and they apply the strategies in the case study and they kind of answer all those multiple choices and they participate in the discussion board, like I don't want I don't want someone that might not be a great test taker to
Hmm.
not pass the exam and think like, oh, this isn't for me. And then as a result, not go on and train people with disabilities. But I don't know if like I don't know if that's a cop out for me personally, being like I should make this exam harder. So it's I don't know, it's kind of finding that balance. So there is a final exam, but it's kind of open ended. I review them. I have conversations with the coaches. Typically, email them after I review their finals. Um, but yeah, I think it's everyone kind of comes from different backgrounds. So for me to think
Hmm.
like there's only one way to apply this content is um is a little conceited. Like I have yoga teachers and physical therapists and occupational therapists. Like they don't all come from the same background. They don't all have that personal trainer education that you and I may have. So I can't assume that they're gonna have the same set of knowledge that they come in with. But I like to see how they can apply the content to their specific domain. So yeah, there is a final exam, but it's a little open ended, and if the coaches demonstrate that they completed all the content and they put effort into the exam and they kind of demonstrate that they can apply some of that content, then that's what gets them a passing grade. So
I love it, man. And what if you're able to talk about it? Because I know
mhm.
sometimes coaches got to keep things under wraps, but do you have like any future plans for AdaptX or for your gym in general, like where you see the next like evolution is for you?
Yeah, so I just recently incorporated AdaptX as a nonprofit. So my gym's a for-profit entity. This could probably be a whole nother conversation in itself. And like I mentioned before, like I wanted to demonstrate that inclusion was a profitable and a good business decision, and I still strongly believe that. So my decision to incorporate AdaptX as a nonprofit is not in any way assuming that you have to rely on fundraising to work with disabilities, but it's more so because in our new facility here, so um, I bought a building over the summer. So we moved our gym into this, and we moved AdaptX into this building. And I have a few tenants that also pay rent to the building to kind of economically make it all work. But in the new space here, we have a research space. So the Hoyt Foundation, the organization that I mentioned before, helped me purchase a couple pieces of equipment here. And we'll be conducting research on various aspects of inclusive and adaptive fitness. So kind of what I mentioned before, like reducing secondary health outcomes in people with disabilities. So we have a bunch of universities that we get students completing their capstone projects with us. And then hopefully we have one of our publications is being presented at CSM, which is like the big physical therapy conference
Yeah.
this week in San Diego. So I have a poster presentation next Saturday. Obviously, I'm not there. It's a little hard to travel with a 9 month old, but
Yep.
I have some of our students from Mass College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences are out there, and they're going to present the poster. But yeah, so we have the research space and the education, and that kind of just lended itself better to nonprofit structure. Like maybe we can get research funding, grants for specific research projects we want to conduct, and at the heart of like my educational endeavors, like I'm fortunate that the gym's able to subsidize my lifestyle, and I can kind of work on AdaptX as a passion project and haven't taken any money from it in the last 3 or 4 years. I prefer to kind of reinvest it into the business and kind of help it reach more people. So it just lended itself better to nonprofits. I didn't really have any financial motivations, and there's a lot of grants and funding available for organizations that support individuals with disabilities. So yeah, so that's and kind of like I mentioned earlier, I'm hoping AdaptX will connect me with people that maybe want to open gyms and I can help them do that. So
That's amazing, man. And the research side of it, that's another cool one. So you got the strength and conditioning, the personal training, the group fitness for athletes. You got the courses and you got the research side of things. That's a lot to juggle, dude. But that
yeah,
sounds
work
so
on
exciting.
yeah, and I think they all go hand in hand. Like I think the research is going to influence some parts of our curriculum.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can develop best practices for working with different disabilities. And I think
In-house, it can
like
come directly from you, which is the cool thing. The
yeah,
research directly to your content, directly to your programming with your
yeah.
coaches. Like that is so cool.
And maybe it's like part of it as well is like I'm somewhat academically inferior in that I kind of only got an undergrad degree. There was really no reason for me to get post grad degrees going into the private sector, and I kind of like went right into work. So a part of me like really misses that I didn't get to do a master's program, etc. So I love being immersed with these research projects because I learned so much, and that's how a lot of the content for the course was built too. It was just me reading, combing through books and papers and trying to figure out what the best, because I was kind of like terrified that I wasn't going to provide the best services for these people that I cared a lot about. So it was
Yeah.
like, I think sometimes being behind the eight ball is almost advantageous because it makes you kind of learn as much as possible. And I fortunate, I think that I kind of still have that mindset where I'm trying to learn as much as possible. So
It's a good mindset to have, man. I always tell my coaches, if you meet someone who has all the answers and says they know everything,
yeah,
you might want to run away.
Yeah,
Because I have plenty of times where I say, I don't know, and I don't know. So to hear someone in your position say it is just constant, affirmation that, you're not going to know everything and that
yeah,
it's
and
constantly learning process.
it's tough. That's one of the reasons why it makes like kind of being in a teaching position tough, is like I don't think I have all the answers, and I don't think my course encompasses every aspect of adaptive fitness that it could, just because there's so much that it could cover. So it's tough for me to kind of put myself as an authority figure. I really just want to kind of learn alongside the people that are taking the course. And I always open to feedback and finding ways to make the course more engaging and more interactive. And there's questions in the post course survey where I ask them where I missed the boat and what content they would like to see, and I really use that to influence the next modules I create and the curriculum that I create. So
Well, Brendan, you may not have all the answers, but you have some answers.
I got
And
some
what I will
answers.
say is, I don't know how much I've told you, but one of my slogan for my business is do the damn thing. It's something that Katie, it's funny enough look how that comes full circle. Katie heard me say it one day, and I would say it quite often because a big issue I struggled with growing up was I needed everything to be perfect before I did anything. And so because I needed everything to be perfect, nothing got done. And it was like these chronic procrastination. So what I realized is make it as good as you can, put it out into the world because it will provide some benefit. And then you can always revamp and redo. And you, in fact, sir, like you are doing the damn thing. You are doing it across multiple dimensions, and you are having great impact in not only your athlete's life, but also coaches you come in contact with.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much, man, for taking the time. I really do appreciate it, especially with running you got in the morning and a young one at home. So thank you so much again. If there's anything you want to plug at this time, and I'll be sure to put all these links down below, just let me know what you want to plug.
Yeah, nothing really outside of the course. Love to answer any specific questions people have about it. Happy to share kind of a preview of the content if they want to see what it looks like before they commit to anything. But yeah, like I said, I think it's more than I hope it's more than a certification course. Like it gets you those CEUs, but it also gets you a part of our community. And I think sometimes, like I heard somewhere that people don't sign up for courses for the content, but to kind of emulate the person that created it. And maybe if anyone wants to be in a position like I am, owning a facility and stuff, like I think I can provide value in that regard as well. So yeah, the courses, it's more than just the 18 modules, but it's kind of those monthly presentations and the openness to kind of touch base with me if they have any questions. So yeah, nope, just the course is kind of the main thing that I hope some people will find interest in. So
Yes, I'll be sure to put those resources down below where y'all can check out, learn more about it. And so if you're interested in it and potentially purchasing it, you'll have the option to do so. Y'all know where to find me. We got Instagram and TikTok. By the time you're watching this, there's a good chance we'll have started reels or not reels, shorts on YouTube. So content will be available on 3 platforms. That is Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. So that way y'all can watch it on what is ever most convenient for all of you. That is for daily content, some fudgeducation, if you will. Of course, you can go to theshiftmethod.org, we still have those custom training templates, everyone. If you are balling on a budget, you want to get some training from yours truly, $80 for 8 weeks of custom training templates across 4 different goals that we have. And of course, if you're in the local South Florida area and you want to train with me at Johnny O's Gymnasium, just click any of those take action buttons. Again, that's theshiftmethod.org. And I'll be sure to get in contact with you and we can work together. Brendan, appreciate you so much, man. You have a wonderful night.
Thanks for having me.
Later, everyone.